Hey, and welcome back to the All In podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Van Horn, who's athlete transition coach and host of the Shift podcast, which I had the pleasure of being on. It was definitely my pleasure. So thank you so much for being here.
No, thanks for having me, Natalie. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into what you're doing now, but also like what you've done to lead up there. Could you kind of go back and kind of tell me your history in sport before we talk about what you're up to?
Absolutely. So I'm from Michigan originally, in the U.S., and I was a multisport athlete. So played soccer, basketball, and baseball, and then the occasional track meet here and there when I had time. But yeah, just loved sport, loved to compete, and then was blessed to be able to play soccer at university. And I was actually able to sneak in 1 year of basketball in university as well as a point guard. Just a really cool story. I had an opportunity to be able to play. But yeah, I had a successful career through university, and just love sport, love what it teaches you in life and as a human. And like I said, had a great career, and then was given the opportunity to continue to work with athletes. So I currently serve, support, and mentor pro athletes now. And I've been able to take a lot of my life experience, how I've developed and grown, and be able to instill that into younger, flourishing athletes.
Awesome. I love that. I want to touch on that story of playing basketball and soccer because you know my sports story. Like I didn't get the traditional college university experience being an individual sport athlete. That's not like a college sport, but from all I hear about the demands like of being a student athlete, it's so high. So how did you play soccer and basketball at the same time?
Yeah, it was interesting because I did it it was actually my junior year. So I came in as a freshman, was recruited to play soccer. But I love to play basketball. And that was just, like I said, I loved just competing in that. And so when I got to university, I went to Ohio Wesleyan University, a little Division III school outside of Columbus, Ohio. And when I got there, I approached the soccer coach and said, hey, would you be okay if I tried out for the basketball team? And he's like, yeah, approach the coach and see what he says. And the coach that was there at the time was more of a traditional sort of old school coach. He's like, hey, my report day is October 16th. If you can't be here for that, then you can't play for me. And I'm like, well, I'm here to play soccer. So no, I'm not, whatever. And so my junior year, though, my third year in university, he was let go. And so a new coach came in, and so I approached the soccer coach. I was like, hey, his name is Jay. I go, Jay, what do you think about me trying out? Just trying. He goes, absolutely, go for it. And so I was like, all right, fantastic. So we, August, first week of August, report for soccer, play until the end of November, early December, depending on the playoffs. And so I approached him. I said, hey, coach, can I come try out? And he was like, yeah, come out for a week and I think he was just sort of throwing me a bone like, here, we'll see, whatever. And so I try out. It's the day 2 and he goes, yeah, Jonathan, you're on the squad. We got a spot. I'm like, awesome. And so that started the process. So I was converted to a point guard. And when I was playing in high school, we were just a running gun for basketball. So we had like 3 plays. And we weren't super tall. We just ran teams to death. We pressed, high pressure, high press, and we ran 3 plays and that was it. And so I get the first day I'm point guard, he gives me the playbook and there's like 35, 40 plays. And I'm like, what's this? He's like, well, you got to know all these. And I'm like, what? I'm like, this is crazy. I'm like, all right. So the first month I was still trying to figure out all the plays because they're already in this. The season started about a month and a half, 2 months before I showed up. So I was way behind the show as far as the progression and that kind of stuff. But it was great. I loved it. Yeah. Physically, it was demanding because I was I had about, in the course of 12 months, I had about a week and a half off in my body at the end of that. Yeah. So I went from soccer to basketball, took about 3 days off after basketball season got done, and went right back into soccer training again. And my body was just, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was an awesome experience.
That's so cool. I think it's been interesting to see like how many multi-sport athletes from high school then go on to be very successful in university and pro, but it is rare to see a multi-sport athlete in university itself, other than sometimes you see football and track, and those things go together. Could you touch on like, what do you think the importance is for young athletes to be multi-sport athletes and get exposure to all these different sports, different coaches, different playbooks, learn these types of things?
Yeah, it was significant just because of the physical demand was so different. Like soccer, you have this endurance sport where I'd average 7, 8, 9 miles in a game. Like that was normal. But then basketball, it's all these quick sprints and these quick left and right movements and these quick explosions that the basketball court, you go maybe 10 yards here or there, and that was it. And so the fitness side of thing was really hard. So the first 2 weeks of basketball was like, I'm like, I could run for days, but then I put me on a court and in 10 minutes I was done. Like I was winded from all the quick short bursts and sprints. And then also the jumping reality is that just learning, just jumping all the time in basketball, but then going back to soccer, that first 3 or 4 weeks back in soccer, I was same thing. I couldn't run, longer than 20 minutes because the endurance wasn't there. So having those different muscle groups, the different perspectives of how you think and how quickly you think in basketball, you have these quick plays, these quick moments, but then you have a little bit of rest. With soccer, it's consistent all the time. There's different ebbs and flows to the game. So it forced me mentally to think differently. It forced me to learn new mental skills and how to approach the game and how to navigate the nuances of transition and what that looked like, how to recognize things, how to respond quicker, be more proactive. And then just the coaching perspectives, being able to have different coaches speaking different things and different ideas and thoughts. And I was able to take stuff I learned from basketball coach to the soccer field and vice versa. I realized, hey, there's things that I can learn in the soccer that I can help build into. And I think, to be honest, that was one of the reasons why the basketball coach brought me on. I was like the 12th man. I was the guy at the very end of the bench. So I didn't play a ton, but I got to play. But I think that was part of it. He goes, he's like, as a leader, as a third year university leader, he has a younger team. I was able to come on and just give perspective to some of these younger guys that were more talented, more focused on the basketball side of things, and just and build and invest in them. And the perspective of handling pressure and how to be willing to take that last shot, and what does it look like to have the weight of the team and that winning opportunity on your shoulders, and just navigating that with the players. So that was really good. Like I said, mentally, emotionally, mindset wise, as well as the physical aspect of it.
Yeah, that it would only be beneficial to kind of have those different experiences with different mentors and coaches, because you can bring that not only to your own mindset, but to the mindset of all your peers. What's the difference in the mindsets of like a sport like basketball, where it's very high scoring, so you have a lot of chances, versus a sport like soccer, where there's very small chances? You see a lot of 0-0 games. What's the mindset difference there, especially when it comes to taking advantage of those few opportunities?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me was progression. Like within soccer, it was, if you're progressing toward to score, and ideally every time you get the ball, you want to score a goal. Like you said, 0-0, like 1-0, 2-1, there's always low scoring games. So it's just a sense of progression and the reality of like field position and having the ball, possessing the ball. These little nuances were so important to success. And then in basketball, it's then you had these moments of run and gun where it's just up and down the court really fast, and you're putting 80 points up. But also there was the aspect of still wanting to take care of the ball. So when you got the ball, the goal, even though the score was still higher, every time you got the ball on the possession, you still wanted to score. And so having that same mentality transferred over, but it was also allowed me to navigate failure a lot quicker in basketball, because if you're shooting 50%, that's a good day.
Yeah.
So the reality is you're going to miss half your shots, 60% of your shots you're going to miss. And so just knowing that, okay, it's okay. Like being able to have those mistakes and have those failures and not hit the mark was part of the process, and just learning to navigate that and be able to get it out of your mind right away. Like that was huge. It's like, I made a mistake. It's okay. Next one, next play. That was one of the things we always said, hey, next play, next one, or next one, something like that. And that was just to help remind ourselves that don't dwell on the mistake, learn from it, but keep going.
I love that. I think that's another checkbox on the pros of being a multi-sport athlete, because you learn these different lessons that perhaps you wouldn't have learned as fast in soccer because of just the nature of play of basketball. So that's really cool. I selfishly want to ask you about the energy system side, because obviously you touched on the conditioning and how soccer is such a different sport energy system wise from, the more anaerobic, in a sense, just explosive nature of basketball. Was it just kind of suffering through those first few weeks of transition into practice, or were there things that you did in the differences of your training when it came to energy systems to be able to transition into endurance and then transition back into power explosive?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it was. I really looked for where are the similarities. Like that was for me, is use that as a starting point from the similarities, and then really focus on where do I need to go from there. And so within soccer, our warm-ups, a lot of times we do agility and ladders, or use cones for some diagonal or horizontal movements. So I was like, okay, we're doing that in basketball as well. So I'm like, okay, I know that I'm sufficient and really proficient in those spaces. Let's start there. And then what's the next progression? So within soccer, we do 120s, which is the length of the soccer field. I said football. That's what's proper football. So it's linked to the field. So we do that. You'd have to run 15 seconds down, and then you have like 45 seconds to get back. So you're a full minute to do a full down and back. And then in basketball, it was more like a quick 5 feet or 10 feet and these quick explosions. So I just said, okay, I'm going to focus on those quick explosive movements. And so I'd stay after practice and I'd do from the baseline to the free throw line and then back, and then to the half court and then back to the free throw line, then I mix up and go to the 3-point line. So these more quicker, explosive, just to train my body to get used to that and to recover. And then similar to, like I said, that on soccer, we had a long 45-second recovery. I did the exact same thing then with basketball. Okay, I got 15 seconds and I'm going again. Just knowing that just part of the game, what's happening in the game is going to be similar to that, where I may have 5 seconds, may have 3 seconds to recover. And I just got to force myself to leverage the base that I have, the similarities, but then also realize, okay, I got to push myself in these new areas to retrain my heart and my lungs and my capacity. And then also a lot of it too was the muscles in my legs, like just the quick turning, the angles. So my calves, ankles, the quick explosion with the hamstrings, the jumping movements, that kind of stuff. That was retraining. And so that was the biggest thing, is like, okay, what are the areas that I'm weak in that I need to adjust? And then the same thing going back to soccer. It's like, okay, I got to really work on my endurance and my longevity. So it sucks, but I have to do 120s. I got to go and do the 3 miles in sub 21 minutes. Like you just got to do it and just force yourself to do that extra work to get caught back up, because I was behind.
Right.
And that first month of basketball was brutal because everyone else was already fit. Like they've already playing games. They've got that fitness, and I was lagging. So it's like, I got to get caught up.
Yeah. That's really cool to see the transition between the two sports. I know, watching, like, for example, the Michael Jordan documentary, you see how his coach completely transformed him into a baseball athlete. And then when he wanted to come back to basketball, there was so much work to be done just to transition the body. And I think people kind of forget that when they're looking externally at athletes. They're like, oh, they're good at this, so they can do that. But we forget that, like, even our hearts are built in different ways. For example, in the sport that I do, I've realized a lot of like my strength is like power and explosiveness. And so being able to do like 1 minute super hard on the assault bike, it's built up like a thickness in my heart, versus to be enduring, you want to actually build up like an enlargement of your heart. And then when it comes to, like, for example, CrossFit, you want to be good at both. So you need to like meet somewhere in the middle. So there's a lot of different changes that go on in your body. And then, like you already touched on, in the mind too, to be able to go back and forth to these sports. So yeah, kudos to you, because I could not even imagine playing 2 sports at the same time, of like managing school and everything at that level. But how was that transition for you as an athlete, then going into kind of the world of coaching and supporting other athletes?
Yeah, it was a mixed bag, like, cause I was still around athletes. And so I saw the aspects of being on a team and still competing, and what I missed, but I was then an outsider.
Right.
And so I wasn't actually, I was around it, but I wasn't in it. And that was really hard for me. Just because it's like, I missed that. I miss the connectedness. I miss the camaraderie. I miss the banter, the laughter, the memories, the road trips. And now I was the support staff type person on the outside, sort of looking in, going, oh, I wish I was there.
Yeah.
And so that was a whole nother, just a process, just from a mindset for myself, going, okay, I'm no longer the guy doing the work. I'm the one who's now helping the athlete become better. And so that was, for me, even just a journey of itself, a transition, just trying to figure out, okay, how do I transition, not wanting to be the person competing and putting myself in their shoes, but how do I step on the outside to empower the athlete to be more successful, to develop and to grow. And that was a journey. Like, for me, personally, it was a journey, because I still, when you're 23, 24, I was still athletic. I could still play, could still compete. I'm like, I can jump out there. I can still I can still play. But it's like, no, that's not your job. That's not. And so that process was good, but it also gave me a perspective to step back. And this is something from a mental standpoint, being able to step back and see what was actually going on, the forest amidst the trees, if you will. As the perspective was significant change for me. And then also using that perspective then to empower the athlete, to help them see a different angle or a different avenue of how they're developing and how they're growing.
Right. How was it like with like the ego side of things? Because an example of something that I went through was once I retired, I remember like a month later, I went to this CrossFit competition to watch some people I knew compete. And I remember going back to the hotel room. I was like, I can't watch this. And everyone thought, they're like, why? Like, what is going on? And I was like, I'm used to being that person, like that everyone's coming and watching. And as much as it seems like silly, like, it's like, why do I want to be that person? It was like, you get used to that as an athlete, of having the crowds cheering you on, of being like that person in your friend group that everyone's coming to support. How was that like for you?
When your name is no longer chanted or in the headlines, it's hard. And I think that one of the things that's really helped me perspective wise is what drives me. What really gives me passion, desire is other people. It's seeing other people flourish. And so when it was just having that in perspective, I think, but that was a journey too. Like that was part of for my own personal self growing and my own self-awareness. How am I wired? How am I created? What are my strengths and abilities? What's my life experience? What has it taught me? So leveraging all those things and realizing, okay, it's not just about me. And when realizing it's not just about me, I'm there to influence the space that I've been entrusted with. You know, the arena in which I'm in now, and my arena is no longer on the soccer pitch or on the basketball court. My arena is with empowering these other athletes and these other humans to be successful in the spaces that they're in, and to influence not only athletically, but just positively influence the spaces in which they're in, whether it's community, neighborhoods, universities, or professional clubs with fan base, that kind of stuff, is having a greater impact in those spaces. But it's still hard. Like, you know, you still like it felt good. Like I remember, like even just like married, had my daughter, is probably married for 4 or 5 years. And I was at a garage sale, and there was a kid, it wasn't a kid. They were back from university. They're like, "Oh, you're Jonathan. You played soccer at Ohio Wesleyan." And I was like, "Yes, that is me." I'm like, this felt awesome. Like, it was like someone still remembers me.
Oh my God.
It was awesome. And they came to like some camps that I coached at, and they'd watch me play when they were in middle school. And, you know, this was like, 7-8 years before that, but it was that sense of someone still knows my name.
Yes.
But it was a little boost of the ego, but it was a sense of also the reality of that setting is that that's no longer my job. It's and that I'm okay with that. That's not my role. That's not my role in the space that I'm within society, in the community, that I'm in athletic space. It's more to invest in the athlete and empower the athlete. It's not about me.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of athletes, and I mean, I think this is the same thing we're seeing it probably with social media influencers, with celebrities, like whatever it is that you're doing where people are watching. It's in kind of the entertainment type industry that your self-belief starts being tied into something that's temporary, like how many followers you have, you being an athlete and people watching you. Like at some point, people stop watching. Like Michael Jordan is still relevant as a name. People aren't out there cheering his name at games anymore. Like he's not that guy out there. Right. So for everyone, these things come to an end. Your album sales drop, whatever it is. Yeah. How can we either, overcome that later on, or preemptively tie our self-belief into something that isn't temporary like this, so that when the crowd goes away, we're going to be okay?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that when we answer the question, who am I? And that dealing with identity and who is self, is that we need to make that foundation in something that can't be taken away. And that's hard. It could potentially be difficult to identify what is that thing. So maybe whether it's a purpose, a cause, or maybe it's family, it's a loved one, or whatever it may be, a spiritual faith, whatever it may be, but it's something that can't be taken away. But then also it's tied to also a character. It's just, what does your best self look like? And when your identity and self is a person of excellence, or someone said it was what they said, show up filled up. That was their mantra, show up filled up. And so it's a sense of, hey, I'm going to show up filled up in this space to be at my best, to be excellent, regardless of what's happening. And that's who I am. I show up filled up. And so it's like having something like that, or along those lines, that allows you to step into the space regardless of the environment, but also recognizing that it can't be taken away from you. Like that having that pursuit of excellence, or that character of a person of courage, like that can't be taken away. That's a choice that you make each and every day to act courageously in the space, or to be resilient, or to, like I said, maybe a faith perspective, or whatever it may be. You're able to take that with you as who you are, and regardless of the circumstance and the environment, and the things, specifically the things that are completely out of your control. Like I said, album sales, sport, those things majority of the time are not in your control.
Yeah.
Like whether you sign a new contract is not up to you. It's up to the GM or it's up to the coach. Whether you sell albums or books or increase your followers is based on someone else's choice. And so you have no control over that. So it's recognizing that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us also, especially as athletes, we tie our identity to performance or outcome-based goals. Like we have this end goal of, for example, for me, it was like, I want to go to the Olympics and then I will never be happy until I get there. And like who I am is someone who is trying to be that, right? And I won't fully be who I am until I get there. How can we move away from that type of motivation and shift our goals into what you kind of said of making sure that foundation is something that can't be taken away?
Yeah, I think part of it is recognizing what Simon Sinek calls it the infinite game. And it's realizing that our life is not just about self. Our life and our influence and impact on this earth is not only for others, but also for generations. So a lot of the athletes that I work with, we talk about generational impact. And so whether you come from lower income or poorer neighborhoods, or you come from affluence, is that we want to generationally have an influence in the spaces that we inhabit. And so it's just, what does that begin to look like? Is that when you play that long game, it's not just about this moment or this next season or this next Olympic cycle or World Cup cycle. It's about something greater than that. And so when we have that vision of longevity and the infinite game, we're able then to step into the moments and still pursue success. Still you want to be in the Olympics. You want to win the championship trophy. You want to achieve those things, but your sense of self and your significance and your value isn't determined or based on winning those things. So it's not that the desire goes away, because you can ask my wife, I'm still one of the most competitive people out there. Like Monopoly Deal and other card games. My kids are like, Dad, what? Oh, like, come on, Dad. I'm like, I'm winning. I don't care. I'm winning.
We have a Monopoly Deal scoreboard.
Yes. Love it. I played a game with my daughter before school this morning. Like we're competitive and that's okay. That's actually, there's beauty in that competitive nature and that competitiveness. But it's where it begins to turn is when we begin to base our sense of self and value and significance, whether or not we win or not. And that's where the issue. So it's like, okay, how does developing competitiveness, willingness to be a good loser, to accept loss in a healthy way, but not settle there, but also still striving to be successful, to find progression, to pursue growth, and having that long game. So I have 3 daughters. So I want all my girls to be competitive. I want them to live courageously. I want them to be a voice of hope in the spaces in which they inhabit. And I want them to find success in sport and academics and whatever they end up deciding to pursue. But I don't want their value and significance to be based on those results. And so I want them to fully know they're fully loved, that they, regardless of what their choices are, the love that I have for them will never change. And so that's so important, really emphasizing that.
Now, I find that a lot of athletes, we like to learn things the hard way sometimes. And definitely the case in my story. And like going through these things of having identity tied to these outcome-based results and these types of things, it's like that then has shifted it to learn the opposite way, right? Yeah. How can the younger athletes who maybe they don't yet have the platform to make an impact on their direct community, but how can they start to build those things and realize that's what they want to do and that's who they are, rather than like, oh, I just can't wait till I become the college athlete. I can't wait till I go pro. Yeah. How can we build it into that, the younger athletes, so they don't have to repeat these same mistakes? Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's a good question. The thought that really comes to mind is the faithful with little, faithful with much. And you don't start, when you start competing as an athlete, you're not doing all these crazy, moves and things on the very beginning. You start real basic, simple, like within soccer, it's simple touches. You're taking a touch. And then if you're juggling the ball, it's one juggle at it. You're starting with one juggle, one touch, and that's it. Same with basketball. It's one dribble. Like it's simple. There's really simple. Then you maybe learn maybe a crossover, or maybe for soccer, it's a step over. But it's a progression, and it's the same way within that mindset and that the reality of sense of identity is that you don't try to do all these great things all at once. It starts simple, start small. There's James Clear, Atomic Habits, talks about that. It's like these micro habits. It's a fantastic book. It's a sense of you want to create a new habit. It has to start with something so minuscule that your brain can't trick you to stop. Yeah.
So it's so small, so minute that it's just something where it's a no brainer. I can do this, no problem. And it's starting there. And then that habit, as you develop that habit, you can grow over time. And it's the same way with their influence. Is that I truly believe that we all have influence, whether you're 5 years, 6 years old, just getting started, you can have an impact in someone's life. You're a leader, or you're 25 and you're on the national team and you're playing in the World Cup or the Olympics, you can have influence. And so it's just recognizing that. So it's faithful with the little things and knowing that that's going to build momentum and snowball in a positive way, to be faithful with those big things. But it starts small.
Yeah, that's some great points. I think that's a mistake with athletes. I think we often think we have to do something really big when we forget the impact of doing something really small. Like, for example, a lot of athletes, their motivation might be their family. For some time I was like, I want my grandma to come see me at this competition or whatever it is. And now I realize like what she wants is to spend time with me. And if she can come, like she used to come and hang out at the gym with me, or now I do a Zoom class every day virtually with her together.
That's awesome.
But those are the things that actually matter. And at any age, any stage in our progression, we can do that, versus often we see that athletes are like, no, I can't spend any time with my family because I need to like make it. And then I can like pay for them for the house or do this, when it's like, what would have mattered at just spending that hour each day or whatever it is. It's interesting how we kind of think that we need to do things in a very big way, but we forget the impact of the small things. And we forget where our true motivation might come from. For example, if it is to like buy our parents this house or whatever it is, then like amazing. But what are some things that you can do now to like make your parents' life better? And often that could be just spending your time with them. Yeah.
Well, and making those memories like that, like my daughters are going to remember more the Monopoly deal games before school than they will anything that I've done athletically or business-wise or any of that kind of stuff. That's what they're going to remember. And that's what's going to have a significant influence in their lives, 20, 30 years down the road. And it's making those memories together. And when I look at my life, like I don't know about what your athletic like growing up was, but I remember going to tournaments, and I remember there's certain moments. Yes, you remember those moments, but I really remember a lot of the relationships and the fact that my parents were in the stands, because of life circumstance and just work. And because my parents my dad's working multiple jobs, like they weren't able to come to a lot of my games. So I remember when they were there, and that meant so much to me that they were there cheering me on and celebrating me. And that was awesome. And so those are the things that I remember, not necessarily the fact that I won a tournament in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah. 100%. It's that time spent. Like I don't even, well, actually I was going to say, I don't remember the amount of times I've lost at Monopoly Deal to my boyfriend, just a time, but I do remember because we got the scorecard up there and he's won twice as much as I have. And it drives me insane. We definitely, there's definitely a tracking system. It may not be a board, but there's definitely an internal, like you've won the last 4 games. I'm like, I know, it's okay. Oh man, that game can get heated. It drives me so crazy if he just wins right off the bat, and I'm just like, oh. And then he acts like, oh, just another win, and I'm like, oh, like we're playing until we win, and then we're ending this. That's awesome. Man. Yeah, that's a great game. So how can athletes prepare for their life after sport while they're in it, but without like taking away focus? Because I think a lot of athletes, they think if I'm going to start preparing for my life after sport, it's going to take away from me, like giving it all to be an athlete right now. But I find it's probably not the case if you do it in the right manner. Yeah. One of the things, like I said, being a multi-sport athlete through high school, one of the things I learned was that the importance of different perspective, different aspects of sport, and different ways that my body can train and be successful. And I take that a lot of the same perspective, even as you become an elite athlete at university or pursuing the Olympics or at the pro level, is that when you have other things that you're thinking about or processing about or pursuing, it actually makes you better in your sport. And just because you're not only focused singularly on one thing, when you're able to have some of those mental breaks to think about maybe marketing or business or a nonprofit or another cause that you have a desire to be part of the solution, and to begin to think about that, or just taking that time away with family time, just having some of those relational connections outside of the sport. When you're doing that, that allows you actually to be more successful in your sport.
because your body, your brain needs time to rest, but also to think about other things. And you're creating some of those new neural pathways in your brain to allow your brain to function at a higher capacity. And when you increase that emotional capacity, increase that capacity within your brain, you're actually able to compete at a higher level. And so again, it doesn't have to be significant, it doesn't have to be huge, but what are some of those things that you are passionate about? Like, what are some things when you were 15 or 16 and you were like, just sort of all of a sudden was like, hey, that was fun. And I heard a buddy talking about it. I'm like, oh, that'd be cool to do that, but I can't because I got to focus on my sport. What were some of those things? So have guys go through a process of identifying their story and looking at what were those things outside of the sport that they were competing in and that brought them joy, that were maybe it was exciting or just intrigued them. And I'm like, lad, just spend a few months, go get one book. Not, again, small steps, go get one book on this topic or find a blog or someone that's a podcast or just something that is around this one aspect and just dive into it a little bit and just begin to explore. Again, remember when you were just getting started, just these little exploratory touches or trainings and just begin to see what it was all about. And it's doing the exact same process. So start small, explore other things. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. Like that was one of the things that's like, hey, if you get into it and you're like, this is awful. I hate marketing. Okay, no problem. Or I don't want to be my own business owner. What that has to go with that, all the weight on your shoulders. Like, I don't want that. Right? No problem. But it's just beginning to explore some of those options and really beginning to imagine what could be. Because when you're done playing, that's when you're 29, 30, 35, even the great careers that end at 35 and the 40, some guys playing in their 40s, you still have so much life ahead of you. And so many more opportunities to have an impact in the space and what you're in and the influence that you've been given. And so let's make the most of it. Like when you have that long-term view, that infinite game-like perspective, you're able to have such a significant impact in communities and culture. So let's maximize that.
I absolutely love that you brought up that you might not like some of these things, but getting that taste for it, because I think sometimes people, for example, they'll leave their 9 to 5 for like this thing that they've always wanted to do, or they hear like being an entrepreneur is great, whatever. And then they start it and they're like, I actually hate this. I would rather have the structure of a 9 to 5 or the freedom or whatever it is. And so if you can just give yourself that little taste, it's going to help you speed up the process of just figuring out what is right for you and what isn't. Because often it's hard for us to really pinpoint what we want, but it's easy to pinpoint what we don't want. And so if we can keep eliminating those options, we're going to figure out the path for like, okay, this is what I'm passionate about. And I know I tasted these things, so I've like scratched that itch and I don't have to go back there.
That's right. No, that's so good. And I think the reality is within sports the same way, right? Like when you're starting to pursue something, there's failure, there's setbacks, but then there's opportunities and there's growth and there's maturation in that whole process. And it's the same idea. And I think there's so many transferable skills and concepts from sport to life and post playing that you can maximize, from identity to passion to just the process and the journey that athletes are on, and how that same process is applicable to business, to education, to coaching, or whatever it may be. And it's just helping you shift that subtle shift in your mindset of saying, okay, these same ideas, these same skills that I've cultivated for years now are applicable to business, are applicable to coaching, are applicable to whatever that potential vocation could be.
Right. So you have a book coming out, Shift, the Athlete's Book. Could you walk through like what that book is, what it helps people with, and maybe some of the main points?
Yeah. So Shift, it's actually an acronym it's a 5-step framework to help athletes in that successful transition. And the framework is similar. We've been talking about identity, understanding who you are. So it starts off with like an athlete's preseason. So having your own preseason, understanding just who are you, your story, your values, understanding who am I, understanding who's am I, which is an idea of where we put our adoration and our worship. And then it moves to passion. Like, what's your driving force? Like, why do you do what you do? Like, what is it? What's at the core essence of who you are? And then have it go through a process of beginning to think about what could the future look like. So it's a sense of a combination of enjoying the journey, but also recognizing what's the potential next destination, not the final destination, but what's the next stop. We used to take a lot of road trips growing up. So we would never just go to wherever we're going. We'd always take these little pit stops along the way. So what is that next step beyond playing? And then it's more practical stuff. The focus and limiting beliefs, and really taking action in the daily habits, and understand what are some of the practical applications, goal setting, that kind of stuff, to really help begin to put in place the more internal identity, values in your story and your life experiences.
Awesome. That sounds like it's going to help a lot of athletes. And before we move to some of the last questions, when that book does come out, where are people going to be able to go find it?
Yeah, it's going to be at shiftmystory.com. And so again, the name of the book is Shift, the Athlete's Playbook, 5 Proven Steps to Life After Sport. And shiftmystory.com is where you'll be able to find access to it. We're going to in the process of putting together a launch team to be able to help with promoting the book, but also there'll be some behind the scenes little nuggets and some other little fun bonuses that people, if they participate in that.
Awesome. That sounds awesome. So there's 2 questions I always like to end things on. Right. The first one is, out of all the daily habits that you have, what is the one that is the biggest game changer for you? And it can't be Monopoly Deal. For
me, it's my gratitude journal. Starting the day, 3, and it's just quick. It's 3 things. What am I thankful for? And so it could be the birds that I can hear through the window. It could be we have chickens. So it could be, I can see the chickens playing this morning, or it could be just the coffee and the silence before the chaos of my kids getting up, or sitting at the kitchen table with my wife for a few minutes. So it's quick, real quick, 3 things. Takes up a third of the page. It's really small. So that's really helpful. It helps me set my mindset for the day. That's the starting point. And then I'm off.
Awesome. I love that. And the last one is, if you're at the end of your life, whether it's 100, 200 years, you're looking back, what's the impact that you wanted to have made in one word?
Oh, goodness. All right. Influence. Positive influence.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
That's hard.
It is hard. Please, no one ask me this. Yeah, but it's a tough one. I used to actually ask people the same thing, but first I was shortening people's lives. So I was like, you're 99 years old. It's like, who knows? Elon Musk could extend our lives by then. No idea. Right. And then the other one was legacy. Was the word I used, but I prefer using impact now, because I think, we think about legacy, but how many, like, in your family, you might be remembered, but like, there's very few people apart from Albert Einstein and a few people that were like really just going to remember their names forever. Right. So it's like impact. It's like how those small ripples that you can create. Good. So really appreciate you being on. Thank you for sharing your tips. Definitely will put that link to shiftmystory.com in the show notes so people can find it. Anyone listening in when the book comes out. When do you think the book is coming out?
This summer. So we're looking at the end of June, early July.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.